You are live.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Personnel Administration and Higher Education Committee. It's May 30th, 2025. First order of business is motion to approve the prior committee meeting. Supervisor Ritu, Supervisor Bean, any questions, comments, changes? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That's approved. Next item of business, privilege of the floor, public comment. Do we have any public comment today? Seeing none, we'll move forward. Dr. Duffy, or President Duffy, I should say. Adirondack update, budget request.
Great. Well, good morning, everyone. And I apologize for the casual attire, but it is our golf tournament today. So I'll be hitting the links. Wish me luck. I'm definitely not the best one in the foursome. I'll tell you that. Thank you for giving us some time today to present a quick college update, but equally important is our proposed operating budget for 2025-2026. And so we'll be walking through that with Vice President Keith Kaplan in a few minutes. And I'm just going to start off with a brief update on what's happening at the college. Of course, we have wrapped up our academic year. Commencement occurred on May 10th. Thank you to Supervisor Wild for always providing some wonderful comments. And he knows that he makes me just a tiny bit nervous, and he nailed it this year. So, you know, nothing that we had to worry about. And our student speaker was the one that gave a little surprise at the end. So, but it was a wonderful ceremony as always. And it's the highlight of our year, of course, to watch many of our students who have worked so hard to get to the finish line, and all their families and everyone hooting and hollering in the arena. So that was wonderful. So a lot happened at the college this year. I want to highlight a few things. So Amanda, if you could advance the slide, a couple slides. I think this is our agenda. We're going to talk about, as I said, the college update as well as our operating budget. If you'll advance the next slide. Want to talk a little bit about some exciting new programs that are in the hopper for us. It's quite a process for us to develop a new degree program. It originates, of course, with our faculty determining if there's need for a program, and that's an iterative process that happens over several months. There's a lot of conversation that occurs within the college to develop new programs. They move through a governance process that lands with the Board of Trustees. Once the Board of Trustees approves a program, it then goes on to SUNY, and then sometimes or generally the State Education Department. So it's usually about a year and a half process, but I'm pleased to report that we have two programs that are in that process right now. The first is radiologic technician. We have been hearing regularly from our healthcare providers, especially the hospitals, as well as Adirondack Radiology, that they have a tremendous challenge hiring radiologists. So we had this program over 10 years ago that was in partnership with the hospital. It was actually based at the hospital. We just provided the liberal arts general education courses that come along with that. Now we're actually developing a standalone program that has made it through all of the process as I described. It now is sitting at SUNY. It'll then go to the State Education Department. And because it's a program that ends up in a license for the practitioner, it has to also go to the Office of Health Professions, which extends the process a little bit. If all goes well, which we anticipate it will, we expect to launch this program in fall of 2026. This will provide, I think, a tremendous service to our healthcare community, both here in the Glens Falls region as well as in Saratoga. And we expect to start a cohort that will have opportunities to study at both our Saratoga campus as well as at Queensbury. So we're very excited about that. We know it's a need, and it doesn't seem to be a need that's going away. And so we're pleased to be able to offer that program. The second is environmental science. Ironically, a school that's located in the foothills of the Adirondacks, we never had an environmental science program, and yet we know how important it is to protect our water and our soil in particular. And so our faculty in the science division have developed a program that's, again, at the SUNY and State Education Department approval process. That should move a little quicker because it doesn't have a license involved with that. So if all goes well, we might even be able to kick that off in the spring of 2026. So those are two degree programs that are in development. The second part of that slide is what's really become apparent is that what workforce training has evolved to is not only a degree program, but also shorter term opportunities, what we have been calling micro credentials. In other words, it's usually 2 or 3 credit bearing courses that we bundled that actually result in some sort of industry recognized credential and provides value to an employer. So it could be utilized by someone who may already have a degree, but they want to skill up in a particular area. It could be someone that maybe doesn't want to commit to a full degree, but they want to get started on their education and have something of value quicker. So within a year to be able to be out and working. You'll see the variety that we have. I'll just point out the HVAC program. For those who've been around a little longer, if you remember, we piloted an HVAC program last summer with the Plumbers and Steamfitters Union, actually partnering with them to utilize their space to offer a 12-week program to get people at least at the starting point of technician and potentially to move into apprenticeship or journeyman program or be hired in the residential sector, which we also know has a tremendous need. I'm happy to report that we're able to continue that program through some additional funding through SUNY. And so we'll be kicking off our next cohort this summer as well as in the fall. And every time we don't even barely have to announce it, we already have a waiting list. So clearly a need in our community that we're trying to fulfill. Amanda, the next slide, please. A couple new things you may recall if can't imagine how many things you have to remember, but last year we were granted branch campus status at our Saratoga site. We've been serving Saratoga for over 45 years in a variety of settings. In our most recent site on Route 9 in Wilton, we've been there since 2012. We've always been designated as an extension center, which limits the ability for us to offer full degree programs. Last year, we were finally able to achieve branch campus status, which is a designation provided by the SUNY system. And so now we have the opportunity to really do things differently at Saratoga than maybe we do in Queensbury, not only because the needs in Saratoga County may be different, but also because it can give us an opportunity even to pilot some things. We kind of call it our sandbox, to be able to pilot maybe new ways of delivering instruction to meet the needs of different learners. We spent the last year working on a strategic framework for Saratoga going forward. I often characterize what we've done in Saratoga as Queensbury light. So doing whatever we do in Queensbury, just doing a little bit less of it at Saratoga versus now being able to say Saratoga can be its own unique place. And after a lot of discussion with a variety of stakeholders, including the business community, the workforce community, the chamber community in Saratoga, we've decided, and looking at labor data, what are the needs that are existing in Saratoga, and then also the reality of a 13,000 square foot building that only has so many facilities. We've landed on really focusing in on 3 key areas, healthcare, of course, being one of them, IT, anything in the digital space, as well as in the business area, and focusing mostly entirely on the adult learner, really looking at those who may have either started college, stopped out, or are looking to upskill. As we all know, the work world continues to change, so the need for people to continue to upskill is going to be critically important. And we want to develop this sort of center for career advancement at Saratoga, where we do maybe offer our instruction in various modes, so not always in person or not always online, but a hybrid model, which is what we see as really providing value to the community. So we're often running and putting some new programs in place at Saratoga that we haven't had before, and also almost giving ourselves permission to do things a little bit differently at Saratoga. So I'm sure you'll hear more about that in the coming years, but we're really excited about that. The second thing that came out of that work is we're launching what we're calling an employee readiness curriculum. And that sounds probably more fancy than it needs to be, but one of the things we hear from employers over and over again is, I can train people on the nuts and bolts of our particular business or whatever we need to do. I need employees that are more ready to be an employee. Kind of those essential skills, the things that, for whatever reason, some people seem to lack in coming into the workforce. So in partnership with one of our continuing ed instructors, we've developed about a 7 to 9 day curriculum that's really about how to be a good employee, how to communicate well with others, how to better know yourself so that you know what strengths you can bring to an organization. We're partnering in this pilot with Stewarts and Global Foundries. They are interested in helping us launch this and kind of test it out and see, is this going to be of value? Our vision is something like maybe an employee or a person is interviewing with a company and they want to hire them, but they're going to send them to us for this 7-ish day curriculum to help onboard that employee about being an employee. And then they will take the onboarding for the particular company once the person's hired. So we're pretty excited to see how this all works out. And we expect to have a pilot starting in June, later in June. And then finally, of course, everyone's talking about AI. Adirondack believes that we can help be a facilitator of education and training on how to better leverage all the AI tools that are out there to keep people human, but also to create and enhance their ability to do their job. Excuse me. So we will be launching an AI agility training that starts at the end of June, and we're opening that up to anyone in the community, in the business community, the county, to send employees. Many of our employees have gone through, it's a 30-day challenge of a series of just 15 minutes or so workshop or videos and exercises to just better understand the value and the power of AI. Having gone through it myself, I can tell you it fundamentally changed the way I thought of AI as not necessarily replacing people, but augmenting the work that they do. And it really has changed the way even I've done some of my work. So we're excited about that. Next, Amanda. Also happy to say that we're actually extending our courses out into the Greenwich Central School District, which we've been hoping to do in Washington County for many years. And this is our first opportunity to dip our toe into offering more personal enrichment, workforce training types of programs at Greenwich. But it's a new opportunity for us to extend our offerings outside of our general area. So next slide, Amanda. And then enrollment. So we are, of course, in the full throes of enrolling students for the fall, but we are on target to closely meet our budget for 2024-2025. Our summer enrollment, our first summer session started a couple weeks ago. We're about 10% ahead of last year for summer enrollment. You may remember I brought this to you at some point, but a new initiative we started this year was we actually partnered with 5 different school districts to go in and admit their whole senior class to SUNY Adirondack to reduce any barrier that a student may believe that they can't get into college. And so we admitted 1,000 high school seniors throughout Warren, Washington, and Saratoga County. And now we're extending that a little bit further. Hudson Falls has invited us to come back and actually register students on site. So just continuing to look at ways to reduce barriers for students to go to college. Our fall 2025 applications still remain ahead of last year. We've got about an 8% increase so far in new students, double-digit increases in applicants in that adult learner range, that 22 to 29. And of course, a surge in adult learner interest. And that leads me to the next slide about the SUNY Reconnect. So you may have read in the paper, Governor Hochul had proposed in her budget what they were calling the Opportunity Promise. And now SUNY is calling it the SUNY Reconnect program. It is providing free community college tuition, fees, and books for adult learners aged 25 to 55 in select high demand programs. So starting this fall, students in our case who would study cybersecurity, networking, nursing, substance abuse services, IT, computer science, and engineering science will be able to attend tuition free starting in the fall. So this is fast and furious. We were waiting for the budget to pass to make sure it was actually funded, which it has been. We are off and running and recruiting for that. Within the first 2 weeks, we've already received almost 400 inquiries from adult learners who are interested in being in the program. Of course, a lot has to happen between now and the start of the fall, whether it all pans out for the adult learner. But the good news is, first of all, I would say in my 36 years within higher education, this is probably the most exciting thing that could happen to the community college sector within New York State, to really put a stake in the ground and say, we think it's so important to meet the needs of our workforce and that we're going to put some money behind that. And so we're very excited and supportive of making that happen. I would envision this as being phase 1. You know, there's going to be some maybe consternation. Well, I'm 24, this isn't fair. I get it, but I think this is a good step forward. When Massachusetts implemented this 2 years ago, they couldn't keep up with their enrollment, and then they extended it out to all students going to community colleges. So if we do this well, I'm hopeful that this will continue to be an opportunity to really identify and respect what community colleges can do for the workforce. So a lot more to come on that, but if anyone who's interested, it's for anyone who's never earned a college degree, but it can be for people who may have started a college degree but didn't complete for whatever reason. They would still be eligible for the scholarship. And as I said, it not only covers tuition, it covers fees and books, which is a big step forward in making college affordable for as many people as possible. Of course, you might have heard there's a presidential transition. I promise you I'm leaving at the end of June. This is the longest goodbye in history, but we're in the final turn. Our new president, Anastasia Ertz, will be starting at the college on July 1st. So I know you'll be anxious to meet her. She comes with a tremendous amount of experience, and I know she will pick the ball up and run and keep the college moving forward and advancing. So I'm looking forward to being able to have her introduced to you. And then finally, just wanted to, again, on the horizon, and I have some handouts here. We've been talking about, of course, we have a capital plan that we've been working on. Our next capital project, we believe that's really important, is again, back to meeting workforce demands. Our space right now for our mechatronics program, which feeds into any sort of manufacturing environment, is really just an English classroom that we've shoved equipment in to retrofit as best we can. We want to create a much more modern opportunity for our students to learn hands-on all of the different equipment that is on a manufacturing floor. So we've been working with an architect as well as, of course, the campus community to identify space on campus that could be renovated to create what we're calling the Future Work Center. It's 2 phases. The first phase is in our humanities building, renovating the theater into a large high ceiling space so that it really mirrors what a student experiences when they're out in the manufacturing environment. You know, when we renovated our nursing spaces, we created simulation labs that look exactly like what students will experience in a hospital or in a community setting. When we created Season downtown, we created a real restaurant so students are learning in a place that's going to look like what they're going to work on. This is kind of the next phase of that. So it's a large project. It's a large ticket item, as you can imagine. And so the foundation is positioned to start a capital campaign at some point in the next 6 to 8 months. Also looking at multiple grants to consider what funding might be out there to help support the project. And of course, you know, at some point, probably having conversations with the counties, but at this point, we're not asking for anything, just kind of putting it on your radar as our next step to continue to create a strong learning space for our students, both in the manufacturing area as well as cybersecurity networking, continuing to look at what's on the horizon. And of course, recognizing that Global Foundries, for example, is going to look to expand, and manufacturing is not dead in our region, and all the data is indicating that. So those were some things that I wanted to share with you before I turn it over to Keith. But are there any questions I can answer for you or clarifying information?
Anyone? Nate?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Looking at page 5 of the budget packet, the local share is about 1/3, but then page 7, the local share looks like it's less than 5 million. Should I be adding sponsor and non-sponsor share?
Correct. Yeah, local share in the eyes of the state, and I know people probably go through this too, but is both your sponsors as well as chargebacks that we receive from non-county.
Including-
Yep. Yep.
Thank you.
The others? Go. Please.
What is a chargeback?
Oh, well, how much time do you have? Certainly, I'll turn to my colleagues as well, but in very high level, every community college in SUNY is sponsored, whether it's by 1 county, by 2 counties, in some cases more than 2. And any student that comes from a non-sponsoring county, so for example, for us, all the students that attend from Saratoga County, because they're not a sponsor, the college then charges back a rate equivalent in theory to what you as a sponsor pay, so that we collect that fund that really is funding the college in the same way that the county sponsor is. It's a large portion of our budget. In fact, we receive more funding from Saratoga County than we do from either Warren or Washington County in that chargeback model. It's as previous people used to call it, it's kind of a hamster wheel type of thing, because it not only is an operating chargeback, we also get capital money annually from that chargeback rate, which we don't get from our sponsors on an annual basis. And, but it also is impacted by the fund balance, et cetera. So it's, another source of revenue that's written in education law, and that's how, we receive other funding to support the college.
Thank you.
Does that make sense? Because Eric could probably give you a tutorial. No.
But it's the Saratoga County issues, you would check.
Correct.
That's who the
Yeah,
charge.
every county in New York State. So we get a large percentage of students from Saratoga, and then the second largest pot of students comes from downstate.
That answers my question. Thank you.
Well,
Any other questions?
Josh.
Chris?
I'm going to introduce Keith Kaplan, our Vice President for Administrative Services, who's been with us for almost 5 months now. So he's practically a veteran, and is going to walk you through high level where we are with our operating budget.
Thank you very much, Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Resident of Ticonderoga.
Yeah.
Right. All right. So Dr. Duffy's presentation ended with looking ahead. And what is a budget except looking ahead, right? We're looking ahead to 25, 26. Our fiscal year, everybody's fiscal year is a little bit different, right? Our fiscal year is September 1st to August 31st, community colleges in New York State. So that just gives you just a little bit of what we're gearing towards. This process is what we're trying to do here is get a budget submitted to SUNY System Administration in mid-August of this year. So our goal is to get the budget passed through our county sponsors for the July meeting. So that's kind of the sequence of events here, and this is the first step in that process as far as the counties are concerned. We went over the budget with our Board of Trustees last night, and they approved it unanimously. So the overarching philosophy here for our operating budget really comes down to the word stewardship. We, just like the county, just like any business, we have to balance our budget every year. We're not allowed to carry deficits year after year. We can't go into debt with anybody. We have to stand on our own 2 feet. And so over the course of the last several years, we've had some challenges with enrollment. Things are looking good in terms of new students, as Dr. Duffy just outlined. However, there's always challenges with retention of students in this business. And as a result, this budget reflects a very conservative approach to our expenses. In the cases where there have been where we've had some retirements coming to that's going to be coming to pass in the next year, we're not filling those retirements unless they're absolutely necessary. There are a couple of key retirements that we're not filling. There's a chief diversity officer position that we were able to fulfill those responsibilities with an existing employee. So we're not budgeting to fill that position once it became open. We have a vice president for enrollment and student affairs position that became open recently. We're leaving it to the new president as to whether or not to fill that position. And we're budgeting to do a partial year, but we'll see where that goes. So the overarching theme here, especially when it comes to personnel, which is 3/4 of our budget, is to really try to be as careful as we possibly can, given the uncertainties of our revenues. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Our revenues come to us, and the question was excellent in terms of the timeliness. We talk about chargebacks. That's number 3 in terms of the different kinds of revenues on this slide. Tuition and fees. We have sponsor support from Warren and Washington County. We have the chargebacks from the other counties from which we draw our students. We have state aid. Our state aid over the last 6 years has not been increased in terms of base operating aid. And I'm sure you recognize this from the county level. Costs don't go anywhere but up. But when your base aid stays the same, basically what happens is, if you can advance us a couple of slides, you can see a pictorial representation. One more. You can see from this slide that white space in the middle there, that's state aid as a proportion of our total operating revenues. In relative terms, over the last few years, that's gone from almost 30% of our operating revenues to 24%. When you stay flat in an environment where costs and needs are increasing, that relative portion goes down. So that squeezes us and it causes us new challenges. So we're appreciative of the state aid, but at the same time, being flat is a tough proposition for us. And you can see the local share, and this is pursuant to that question that came up earlier. The blue boxes are the what we call local share, and that's a combination of the county sponsors as well as the chargebacks put together. So that's about the goal here is a third, and a third. Third from local, third from the state, and a third from the students. And as you can see, we're drawing on about 41% from our students, which is really more than we would like to see. So that's what we're working with in terms of our operating revenue. If we could just maybe advance to the next slide, I think that will give us some of the key points that you need to know in terms of the budget. The operating expenses that we are budgeting for, we have an increase of 2.8%. That is actually quite an achievement to keep it down to just that level of increase, given that we have salary increases that we've had to we've worked out with our faculty through negotiations. That contract was passed by the board last month, as well as health insurance costs and pension costs. The health insurance costs and the pension costs are really outside of our control. So as a result, wherever we've had discretionary power, we've really tried to keep the other expenses balanced. So in addition to some of the decisions that we've had to make, but not replacing some key personnel, we've also had to delay replacing some of our older equipment, some of our computers that we use for instructional use, etc. If it's an old computer but it still works, keep it for another year. So that's kind of those are the nature of the kinds of decisions that we've had to make to keep us down to a 2.8% increase. As I mentioned before, personnel and fringe benefit costs are about 3/4 of our budget. And that's very common. Frankly, I used to be the VP of Finance at SUNY Potsdam. It was over 80% there. So I can tell you that it's a tough nut to crack. You have to really focus on that part of the budget. And as mentioned before, the students are more than the 1/3 goal in terms of the revenues that come from that. We do really appreciate the commitment that both counties have made to funding our institution. We're on a 5-year plan right now. We're about midway through that time period, and that has enabled the county's share of our total budget, as you've mentioned, to go from about 13.5% to 14%. And that just helps relieve some of the burden that we have to place on the students to get through. So as a result of all these different pieces and parts, and there's more detail in the individual booklets that each of you have, but our operating budget is $33.3 million. We also have grants of about $2 million, but if we can go back one slide, actually 2 slides, we're going to have to draw into our fund balance a little under $400,000, $397,000 in order to balance our budget. This still leaves us with sufficient fund balance to comply with our fund balance policy. Our policy is to have between 8% and 16% of operating expenses covered by our fund balance at any given time. With this budget in place, we'll be at 9.6%. So we'll be in our range. Would we like to be a little bit higher? Absolutely. A couple of things that could be upsides for us include the SUNY Reconnect program. If that really kicks off and takes off the way that we're hoping that it does, that will help us out revenue-wise. There'll be some expenses that will be incremental too, but it will definitely be a help. So we're going to see how things go. Right now, we're budgeting conservatively, hoping for the best and planning for a more adverse type of outcome. I'm not going to say the worst. But you can see over time how we've been able to manage the fund balance and keep it within range. So with that, I'm gonna stop blathering for a moment and give you folks a chance to ask questions.
Keith, I have one, if you don't mind. In terms of the state aid percentage wise, does that include grants also?
I'm sorry, I didn't
Does
hear
it
you.
include grants?
The state aid, no, the state aid is the state operating aid, space operating aid.
Now, the grants, you do get grants, right? So
Yes.
how does that fit in with the operating revenue?
Absolutely. Well, when we are trying to do an operating budget, we really look at unrestricted funding that's coming in from these various sources. When you're getting a grant, there's a purpose, right? Got to fulfill that purpose. So we really count for that separately. Because of that, you're getting the grant money in, you're getting the grant expenses out. So we try to segregate that from our operating budget.
Mike, are you asking about grants from SUNY?
Well, grants from SUNY or grants from the state,
Yeah.
because I know we get some grants that are used to like the electrical issue
Yep.
that you have, right? You have some grants for that. Without the grant, you would have to fund that yourself.
Right, we have multiple grants. I mean, the largest grant that we have right now is through the federal government through TRIO. Which is support programs for our students. We have about $1 million. So when you saw that 2.2-ish million, that $1 million of that, or roughly, is coming out of TRIO. So that's a federal grant. We also have other grants that we're managing. What's happened over time is the money that has been allocated by New York State to community colleges, although some have identified that as operating aid, it's actually restricted aid. You can only use it for certain programs. And that has been the allocation that we've received over the last 3 years. 2 years from SUNY have been in restricted aid, really more grants. So we don't count that as operating aid because it's not able to use as unrestricted funds. So yes, we do rely a lot on grants, which we wish we didn't have to,
Sure.
but that has been able to help us scale up, especially our student success initiatives and being able to help more students graduate and complete. We are, of course, very concerned what's happening at the federal level. We're waiting still to hear if our TRIO programs are going to be funded again for next year. If they're not, that's 8 full-time employees, $1 million. And most importantly, it means we may not be able to provide certainly the extensive services that we have been provided. Head Start's another one that we're concerned about.
Yeah, so one of the reasons for my question is there any benefit in us as a committee, as a county, to just send a letter to the state to say, we need your assistance?
It is always a benefit to, obviously, we've been through this state budget cycle. I can't tell you the number of meetings and conversations, and the president's group, as well as the business officers, and especially the trustees, have been very active with advocacy. We've had hearings at the legislature. So as that comes up again, it would be helpful to continue to reinforce. I will tell you that it seems that at least the way in which our chancellor as well as the governor looks at our funding is to fund things that are specifically aligned with state priorities, and workforce of course being a big part of that. And I think the theory behind Reconnect is not only, of course, to help meet workforce needs, but ideally it helps increase enrollment so that our tuition and fee revenue continues to increase so that, we can continue to balance the operating aid. But it never hurts to have letters and some of you may remember last year, what we really focused on is the fact, and this is a fact, that when you add up all the county support across New York State for all community colleges, it's about $530 million. And the state is at about 460-ish. And so we were trying to say, like, if we're going to have equal partners, the state and the county sponsors, the state needs to bring up their contribution. So we're continuing to lobby for that and advocate for it, and any help you can provide, certainly.
Is there a timing issue in terms
Well,
of?
now it's too late for this year, of
Okay.
course, but as we get into the cycle for next year, we'll be knocking on your door.
The president will help remind us earlier.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
Any other questions?
Very quick,
Supervisor
Chairman.
Driscoll.
Thank you for the financial report, but kudos to the men and women in the marketing department. I'm a storyteller, and it was last week or 2 weeks ago, a lot of us voted in for school budgets. And I get a lot of constituents who say, I haven't had a kid in school for 30 years. But I explained to them that what the high school is doing is it's producing the individuals, young men and women who we can pass the torch to at our whatever careers that we're involved in. And I think the college has done a remarkable job of that over the years. I have two family members who are graduates of SUNY Adirondack. And when we read about the young men and women who are all of whom are working in the Tri-County region or with the Capital Region, Great Capital Region, doing some incredible stuff in all kinds of careers. To me, that really resonates. That the ROI is really working. The numbers sometimes are hard to justify when we're working with families who are struggling, put food on the table and to pay the light bill. But when we show that there are successes, I think that resonates, and it's easier to make. For me, it's easier to make that call.
And I'll just add to that when I was preparing this, with my colleagues here, preparing the slide deck, I looked at last year's. And last year's, one of the featured students was the brother-in-law of my future son-in-law. So you want to talk about how it resonates?
Sure.
It resonates directly with me. So absolutely.
Supervisor Richter?
Any other questions?
No, I had a dumb question. What is the state's response when you say, please give us a third? I mean, what are some tangible responses that we can consider when we're, especially as this percentage goes downward?
What's that? Yeah. I think what happens in some instances, depending on which group you're talking to, there's a strong belief in some that even TAP as a grant program to support students is somewhat of a state contribution. So there's that. There is, of course, sometimes we've said, but the state operated campuses are getting this amount. How come we're not getting, at least similar, like, well, you have county sponsors. And so there are varying opinions. I mean, you could go down a conspiracy, theory if you wanted to, but I think in general, the state believes that the best way to invest in community colleges is to incentivize specific areas that are filling the most workforce gaps. And so what happens is, I think, employers talk to the governor's office or the governor's staff and says, how come I can't hire anyone? What's higher education doing? How come I can't hire anyone? And so I think that has been a continued narrative that then seeps into the budget process. So I wish I had a better answer than that. It's frustrating. It feels a little demoralizing, quite frankly, after several years. We at least got the state, 6 years ago to move to a more stable funding. Prior to that, we were funded on a per FTE basis. So imagine that as enrollment, of course, declined, our state aid went down even more, but your expenses don't go down proportionally with that, right? A 1 FTE could be 3 students for us because we have part-time students. They still need to park in our parking lots. They still need to have an advisor. And so, but that, at least we got to what they've been calling this floor. In other words, just don't give us less than last year, kind of maintenance of effort that the K-12 system has. But that's kind of rode out its time. That was 4 years ago. And we still need to have some incremental increase in order to just meet our basic needs. So there's a variety of opinions, but generally, I think TAP also plays a role in that. And I think, again, the SUNY Reconnect program in the governor's head, and as well as the chancellor's, like, this will be really the next opportunity to grow back enrollment.
Any other questions? Supervisor Patchy?
Thank you. When you develop your curriculum, are you taking into account workforce needs, but in today's day and age, it takes a high income job to really make it and to make headway in the world. I mean, I know far too many people that are unbelievably hard workers, but they're just scraping by, and it's frustrating for me to see that. And I guess like as a college, it seems like you're doing an excellent job with everything I've heard here today, but I would love to see us like try to target high income jobs and electricians, plumbers, contractors, and then also educate students on like, all right, well, if you can get a job in being a state police officer, you can retire in 25 years, you can get a pension and, things like this, just that like kind of basic framework knowledge of like, hey, map your life out and, this is kind of 3 different paths that you could go. And, I mean, I went to college, I got a degree in tourism. I used it for a few years and that was about it. And then I went in a different path and I'm hoping that we can try to, target kids to a really good future with the framework that we're providing when they first get there as a freshman.
Point well taken, and I, without maybe spending too much time preaching, but, really, community colleges are evolving to that more, we're kind of calling it community college 3.0. When it was 1.0, we were all about access, just getting students into college, those who had never had the chance to do that. 2.0 is like, okay, once they're here, how are we helping them complete? 3.0 is really exactly what you're saying. How do we help advise students into career paths that have living wages? And so we do very much look at the data. So Rad Tech would be a good example. Anything in healthcare, you can make a living wage in a very short period of time, comparably to other degree programs. So we're trying to be much more intentional about balancing program development with living wage jobs, while also balancing what workforce needs. So, I mean, culinary would be a great example. There's a huge need in the community. Is it always a living wage job? Not at the start. And so, you're trying to balance what the community tells you they need with knowing that maybe their wage isn't going to be as high as it should be starting out. And I think colleges have always struggled a little bit with that ethical dilemma because, and as long as we're upfront with students and we tell them, some people still want to do it and that's fine. But to your point, how are we being very transparent at the start? And I think we're much better at that than maybe we used to be, not because we were trying to lie to students, but it wasn't on our radar as much. So yes, when we do program development, we look at all the job growth as well as the wage data. And quite frankly, if you continue to look at the capital region, the jobs with the most openings are in low wage jobs. And that's a societal challenge, I think, that we have that we can't necessarily conquer, but at least be able to be conscious of it and create the information for students to make good, sound decisions.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions? I have one for Amanda. Do we have to do a referral to finance?
Yes, so essentially the first one would be moving the budget and referring it to finance. I have to take the finance and budget committee will take it up.
So it's not a motion, you just make a referral.
No, you can make, you're gonna make a motion to approve and refer.
I didn't see it in the agenda. So need a motion to refer this to the finance and budget committee. Supervisor Bean on first, Supervisor Mayne on second. Any questions, comments? Call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries.
Thank
you, Keith. Thank you, Chris. Good luck today.
Thank you. Yeah. Get my putting games.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is human resources. I don't know if I see Jackie here today. Okay, so I don't believe that there are any significant issues, so we'll move forward to the next. Clerk of the board, Amanda.
Yeah, so a number of years ago, the board had authorized me to serve on the executive committee on the New York State Association of Clerks of County Legislative Boards. At the conference that I was just at a couple of weeks ago, I was elected to serve as second vice president. So I need a different resolution to authorize me to serve as an officer on the organization. And if everything goes to plan and the organization is agreeable, in future years, I would advance to vice president and then president. So there's one resolution to cover all of that, authorizing me to serve as an officer rather than on the executive committee.
Motion to bring this to the floor, Supervisor Mendo, Supervisor Driscoll. Any questions, comments? Then I'll call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you, Amanda. Mr. Colvin, is Mr. Colvin here? Michael, welcome.
Morning.
Morning.
So I'm here with my normal dry resolution of trying to move some money from the reserve fund to various departments to move along some technology projects we're working on. One being IT and country state.
That's it.
That's it.
Any questions? Let's have a motion to bring this to the floor. Supervisor Molino, Supervisor Mayday, any questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you, Michael.
That was easy.
It's quick.
Get out of here.
Discussed by the county administrator.
Ye-
Oh,
Yes, so you have a memorandum of agreement between Warren County and the Teamsters Local 294 Union for the collective bargaining unit employees within the Sheriff's Department for a term retroactive to January 1st, 2025. It terminates December 31st of 2028. It's my understanding that Larry Hatchwitz was here at the last meeting to kind of walk you through that before they settled the negotiation. This has been signed by the union, so now it just needs signature and approval by the Board of Supervisors.
motion to bring this to the floor. Supervisor Reed, Supervisor Mayday. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries also. Thank you, Tammy. County Attorney.
There are two action items on the agenda for the county attorney's office. The first is a request to adopt a new resolution. Warren County Employee Timekeeping Approval Management Policy. This was a policy that was prepared, drafted, prepared, reviewed, and approved by the Warren County Risk and Safety Committee. It is being proposed for a policy and resolution for the county. For the gap in no policy existing in Warren County currently to cover the process and procedure for properly approving timekeeping. There would be one amendment to the Schedule A that's in your packet as item 6A. Under definitions, the first definition, authority to approve, I would ask that the committee approve the proposed policy after deleting the words "in a management role," so that that first sentence would read, "County employees designated in writing to authorize and approve timekeeping transactions," and so on. Taking out "in a management role," as some individuals who may be designated for this purpose would not be in a managerial role. So, subject to your questions, that's the request under 6A.
So we need a motion with the modification. Supervisor Bean, second by Supervisor Merlino. Thank you all. Any questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question of this motion. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? That motion carries.
The second request for action, again, is an issue identified by the Risk and Safety Committee who drafted, prepared, and approved the proposed unmanned aircraft system use policy at the last committee meeting on May 12th. And what it does is it provides one uniform policy across the entire county for the use of unmanned aircraft systems, which would also include contracting with vendors who are using unmanned aircraft systems as part of the contractual relationship. This would incorporate into it as an attachment the policy previously approved by the Board of Supervisors for the Office of Emergency Services, and also provides a placeholder for a future policy that will be considered and worked on by the Sheriff's Department at some time in the future.
Motion to bring this to the floor. Supervisor Bean, first, and second, Supervisor Eaton, thank you. Any questions? I have one. Larry, is there any issues here with crashed drones?
I'm not sure I understand.
I've just, I had a conversation with Supervisor Etu yesterday. I was involved in this.
You bring that up. I'll just make the comment, I crashed my drone the other day. I think the only people that can fly a drone for the county, whether contracted or a county employee, we decided was going to be someone with a Part 107 FAA certification. And through that, they are required to report any crash that causes property damage or anything starting at a laceration or more. If it causes a scratch, you don't have to put anything more than that. And that's without trying to be an attorney, that's the way the federal law currently exists.
And one of the reasons we were grateful for Supervisor Etu's participation with the working group on this policy, given his working knowledge of the federal rules. So thank you. I'd said that before, I believe, but I didn't repeat it, and I should have repeated it again today.
And I couldn't help myself, but thank you. Nice job.
No one was injured and no property was damaged.
So, I don't know, we do have a motion to bring this to the floor. Any questions, any further questions? Then I'll call the question, motion, all those in favor say aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Discussion items.
Under 6C, there's a report of insurance reserve payments. As this committee will recall, this committee and the board approved an insurance reserve and the authority to issue payments to resolve and settle quickly certain matters that would otherwise be covered by insurance and insurance claims. Part of that policy requires updating and reports to this committee of activity. The last page of your package should be what is the first of what will be an ongoing list as we go month to month. Really for purposes of information of what damages have been paid and the dates that those checks were cut. There are other matters that are pending, but pending matters would only appear once they're closed and a payment is in fact issued to resolve the matter. That's done for a number of reasons. Due to negotiations of a matter that could result in litigation, they're not included. And until we have a final signed settlement agreement and general release from liability, it remains pending and no check is issued. So if there's any questions on that report, I'm happy to answer them, but that's something that will, without judgment, fortunately or unfortunately, continue to grow as 2025 progresses.
Larry, what's the extent of our reserve right now?
I don't have the current numbers in front of me. I can give that to you offline, and then I can also come prepared each month, having a more exact number. We did fund the reserve really just for two departments, the Department of Public Works and the Sheriff's Office, as claims in those two departments relating to vehicles in particular and property damage tended to be I don't want to say higher, but there were more claims in those departments because of the type of work that they engage in on behalf of the county.
Okay, any other questions? We're gonna move to executive session.
Well, on the litigation update, what I have been doing for a period of months now is including in that update any public information, meaning non-attorney client information or information that's not confidential in the reports. Let me just highlight, I'm not going to go through all of the updates that are in that, in those subparagraphs. But under lawsuits without insurance coverage, number 3, you see Kathleen Innes versus the County of Warren Correctional Medical Care. I did want the members of the committee to know that as of Wednesday, as of the 28th, there's a summary judgment motions have been fully submitted to the federal court by all parties. which means that somewhere plus or minus 6 months from now, maybe a little less, maybe a little bit more, we'll have a decision on those motions. Obviously, we hope that the County of Warren is removed from the lawsuit as a result of that summary judgment motion. But I'll update you once we hear back from the federal court on that matter. As a quick additional update under lawsuits covered by insurance, number 3, Jasmine Ernest versus the town of Queensberry, County of Warren. The first of what was 2 scheduled mediation sessions occurred on May 28th. The second session that's noted in there for June 2nd has been canceled. It may be rescheduled at some future time, future date to be determined. And under number 5, Tara Rockwell versus County of Warren. That one's gonna come off of this list before the next meeting because it has now been settled. It's a wonderful example of transferring by contract liability to our vendors. There was a lawsuit against the county in Bass Hatfield relating to personal injuries suffered by Miss Rockwell, who was an employee of a subcontractor working on the renovations that occurred last year at Countryside Adult Home. It was a suit under Labor Law 220, which is an allegation that the injury occurred by the worker or to the worker as a result of falling from a height or an elevation. It's a New York state law and statute that provides for strict liability, meaning it's not a question of negligence. If it's proven that the employee and worker fell from a height, the parties who were responsible are strictly liable for the damages that occurred. It's to ensure safety for workers who work in elevated heights. This employee alleged that she fell from a height above the roof onto the roof of the building. Based on the contract with Bass Hatfield, we tendered, meaning we gave and presented to them and requested that they take over the defense of the county and pay any liability that's incurred to the county, and they accepted that tender based on the contract that we entered into with them. So as a result, they've done the defense work, paid the attorneys for it, and are now paying the settlement amount on behalf of Warren County and themselves for any liability to Miss Rockwell. So that matter has now been closed and the documents have been signed. And under notices of claim number 3, the notice of claim from March 12th, 2025, we'll be closing that and removing it from the forward as well. So subject to any questions from the committee, I don't need to go into an executive session for anything in more detail on those matters. And seeing that there's no questions, there was a request from the chair to go into executive committee to discuss a matter under Public Officers Law, Section 105F, matters leading to the appointment, employment, promotion, demotion, discipline, suspension, dismissal, or removal of a particular person or corporation.
So a motion to enter into executive session, Supervisor Bean, second, Supervisor Mayday. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. This will be relatively quick, ladies and gentlemen.